Hey everyone, it's Nick Valenti with NJ Valenti Art, and in today's video I wanted to go over line quality and what that even means. Line quality really just breaks down to the thinness and thickness of any line that we may be working with. So you can see here I have a few different examples of different types of lines. So here we have a tapered line at the top, a couple examples of that, and you can see how it goes from the thin to thick again. We have overlapping lines where this curve in the foreground here is thicker than the curve we have back here, which would be further off in the distance. So any object that's closer to you will have thicker lines than any objects that are further back in the illustration. It works similar with the weight example that we have here of this shape. The lines at the top of the shape are thinner than the lines at the bottom, creating a shadow towards the bottom and adding weight and more dimension to that piece. You can especially see how it kind of interacts here with that ground plane we've indicated with the straight line. Another way of looking at it as well is to indicate distance, similar to the overlap example we have up here. The shape in the back here has got thinner lines than the shape we have in our foreground. This arrow here is indicating our light source coming from the upper right hand side. So the line closest to that light source will be thinner than the line furthest from that light source on this side here. This will be a thicker line indicating shadow since it is further away from our light source. I also wanted to cover some different types of lines and how these lines can convey certain emotions. So as you can see here, I've done some straight lines using the ruler feature in the program. That's simply holding shift and drawing your lines. Straight lines can give you a very man-made, unnatural feel, and also sturdy or structural. Hand-drawn straight lines, on the other hand, can give you more of a cartoony, whimsical, casual, it's even a fun and light-hearted feel, having that little wobble in the line. Similar to the wavy example that we have here as well, this wavy line oftentimes a little more whimsical, happy, or flowing in nature, especially in comparison to a line here like the zigzag with its sharp peaks and valleys. This here could be very erratic, aggressive, or even disorienting for the viewer when looking at a line like that. And we have finally our curved lines, which are soft, safe, comforting, and more natural in appearance. So something to consider when we're creating an illustration and how we use the lines and in conjunction with each other, what kind of feelings or emotions they can convey. Alright, let's switch over to the design persona and I'll show you how we can vector some of these lines. Alright, so starting off with the tapered line here, we'll grab our pen tool. Got no stroke or fill on it for right now. I'm just going to start creating our line. Alright, so once I've got something there, I can double click on this end here to end that stroke line. I'm going to change this blue stroke here over to black. You can see it's a bit better. I'm also going to come over to the stroke menu up here and make that stroke just a little bit larger for us. And then in the strokes panel, if you come down to pressure here, this is where now we can start to manipulate the thin and thickness of our line. So I'm going to add 2 points somewhere about in the center, roundabout. And I'm going to grab one of these handles on one side. It will drag both sides at the same time. And I'm going to bring these down, making that line a little thicker. Let me go ahead and move this line, better look at it. So you can see how moving these handles here will thin those lines out there. We can add more handles if we'd like to try to thin this middle section out. So I'm going to grab this one here. See how it starts to thin the middle here. I'll drag this one down as well, probably a little bit further, maybe more something like that. So now you can see here how this line will bump up the stroke size a little bit more. So you can see how this line now goes from thin to thick, thin to thick, and thin again. So resembling our tapered line up here. This is using just the stroke feature with our pressure panel here to control the thin and thickness of those lines. We'll see something similar here in the overlap section. I'll again double click here to end that stroke line. I can come back here and in the pressure panel hit reset, and that'll reset our line. I can now create one center point, so I really just want each end to taper and I want the middle to stay the same. Let's just fix this curve here a little bit, move that node. So adding one in the middle, I'll grab one on the outside, again affecting both sides, and just bring those down, and it will taper those ends. So using the pen tool and using just the stroke, we can use the pressure panel here to manipulate thin to thick. I'm also including here an exercise sheet which will be linked in the description below. So I encourage you to either print the sheet out or download it and you open it up in Affinity Designer or whatever program you may be working in, and trace over each set of these lines. So for instance, you'd want to just trace over the straight lines, the circles as well. So I can just go ahead and create a new pixel layer. We'll go over to the pixel persona. And so basically what we would do here is we would just try to follow that line as straight as possible. You could use the shift feature, obviously we're working digital, as the ruler to make that a little bit easier there. But for the circles, ellipses, and these wavy lines and whatnot, as a way to build up our hand-eye coordination and the quality of our line, you want to go ahead and just try to attempt these freehand the best you can. And they're not going to be perfect by any means, but it's really just this practice of trying to get as close as possible that will end up paying off in the end. You'll have better control of your lines. Okay, and then you just kind of work your way through this. Like I said, you can also print this out and work traditionally on the worksheet as well. So I just want to show you a few different examples of how we can manipulate line in the illustrations here. So starting with the Tiger vector inks here, you can see how the scroll art in the background is a thinner line, especially compared to the thick outline that we have around the tiger himself. That will allow the tiger to pop out and stand out in front of those scroll lines, which I want to be set in the back. Another thing is too, is you can see the line on the bottom of his chest fur here is much thicker than the lines on his face, even at the top of his head. This is the bottom portion of the image and it's carrying the most weight. It'll be furthest away from the light source, so I went with a thicker line there, and that also adds some gravity, again, dimension and weight to the piece overall. So if all these lines were super thin, it would just be very light and almost floaty, but by thickening up these bottom lines here, it really adds a lot of weight to this particular illustration. Whereas if you look at the scroll art in the background, all of these lines have a more even weight to them. I wanted those to be a little more static, especially since they were going to be sitting in the background and they were a complement to our main image here. In this example here, our lines on this side of the deer are thicker, further away from the light source. We have the light source coming in from the left side here, so these lines will be a little bit thinner as they are closer to our light source. The details of the deer's fur, those lines are also thinner. We want those to just be details that are secondary to the main lines we have in the deer, especially when it comes into some of these other leaf details and whatnot. We want them to be there, but we want them to stand out or compete with the lines in the roses themselves quite as much. That's why there's some more thickness to these rose petals and these leaves here in the foreground versus these little laurel of leaves here. And we could see a similar example in the vector rows. Our details on the inside are going to be thinner lines, indicating just again that secondary detail. We don't want those to compete with our main lines too much there. So these are just a few different examples of how you can use lines in your vector illustrations, and how you can control those lines for different effects to get the point of the illustration across. All our foreground objects, we want those to have thicker lines. We want those to be grounded and in the foreground, whereas thinner lines set in the background to push those objects further away from us. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. I will be including these worksheets in the description below for free, so go ahead and download them for some practice. Please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more videos coming soon. Until next time.